In the endless valley of the misty hills, where morning fog settles over withered grass and the wind carries the scent of earth and pine needles, a young wolf named Shadow roamed. His once thick black fur now hung in tatters, and his ribs showed through his skin, betraying his long days of hunger. Banished from his pack for weakness, he had left his native forests, where he once hunted side by side with his brothers. Now his paws trod unfamiliar ground, where the scorching sun gave way to cold nights, and hope faded with every step. The Shadow wandered along the cliff where the valley turned into thickets of thorny bushes. His stomach ached with hunger, and the wounds from a recent fight with his fellow wolves bled, leaving stains on the dry grass. Suddenly, the wind carried the faint smell of water and fish. The wolf gathered his last strength and headed toward the source of the smell, a small pond hidden among the reeds. His paws trembled, but instinct drove him forward. Approaching the shore, Shadow tried to step onto the soft ground, but the soil beneath him gave way treacherously. The mud, sticky and cold, sucked in his paws and then his body. The weak wolf could not resist. Every attempt to get out only pulled him deeper into the quagmire. The mud clung to his fur, weighing down his already emaciated body. He was drowning, his chest was constricted, and his eyes, filled with panic, darted around in search of salvation. The Shadow let out a weak wheeze that echoed across the deserted pond. His head began to droop, his neck unable to bear the weight of the mud that had stuck to him. 5 hours had passed. The Shadow lay motionless, only his faint breathing indicating that life still lingered within him. The sun was setting, painting the sky in crimson hues. The cold penetrated to the bone, and hunger gnawed at his insides. A blackbird landed nearby, looked at the wolf with its shiny eyes, and flew away, leaving only a ringing chirp behind. The Shadow blinked, looking at the darkening sky where heavy clouds were floating. He no longer howled or struggled, he just waited, hoping for a miracle that could pull him out of this cold grave. And then, when all seemed lost, the creaking of oars could be heard in the distance. The sound, like a bell of hope, broke the silence. It was Ivan Korneve, an old forester who had lived alone in the valley of the Misty Hills for 15 years. Every morning he would take his old canoe out to fish on the pond. A small camera hung from his well-worn hat, recording the peaceful moments of nature, the splashing of water, the cries of birds, the rustling of leaves. That morning, as usual, he was rowing across the mirror-like surface of the pond, when a strange sound made him stop. It was not a bird's cry or the rustle of the wind. It was a hoarse breath, full of pain. Ivan froze, listening. His heart skipped a beat with alarm. He turned the canoe around and headed for the reeds, about 200 meters away. Parting the stems, he froze. Before him lay a young wolf, sunk chest deep in the mud. Its eyes, dull but alive, looked at the man with despair and a faint spark of hope. Ivan stood motionless for a few seconds, shaken. In his years of living in the forest, he had seen many things, but never anything like this. Without hesitation, he climbed out of the canoe and stepped onto the shore, carefully making his way through the mud. The wolf did not growl or bare its teeth. It seemed to understand that this man had come not to threaten, but to help. Ivan crouched down beside it, placed his hand on its dirty fur, and felt its weak heartbeat. "Come on, little one, hang in there. I'll get you out," he said quietly, his voice trembling with excitement. Ivan began the rescue. He took a strong rope from the canoe, tied it around the wolf's chest, and began to pull. The mud resisted, clinging tightly to its prey. After 2 unsuccessful attempts and 1 fall into the slippery slush, Ivan gathered all his strength and managed to pull Shadow halfway out. The wolf was breathing heavily, but his gaze never left the man. Ivan put his hands under Shadow's muzzle, carefully lifting him up as if cradling a sick child. The canoe rocked, mud dripped from the wolf's fur, staining the wooden bottom. Ivan sat down next to him, holding the rope tightly, and steered the boat toward his home. The way back was tense. Every creak of the oars made Ivan look back, afraid that the wolf behind him would stop breathing. The sun disappeared behind the hills, and the only light was a dim lantern at the bow of the canoe. When a wooden hut appeared in the distance, Ivan breathed a sigh of relief, as if he had saved not only the wolf, but also a part of himself. After mooring, he built a makeshift ramp out of planks and carefully dragged Shadow onto the grass near the house. The wolf was motionless, but his eyes blinked slightly, indicating that there was still life in him. "I don't know where you came from, buddy, but now this is your home," Ivan said quietly, covering the wolf with an old wool blanket. The night brought light rain, but Ivan didn't waste any time. He took the hose, set it to a low pressure, and began washing the dirt off Tenny. The water flowed over the grass, carrying away clumps of earth and exposing the thin body with protruding ribs. The wolf opened his eyes and looked at Ivan. There was no fear in his gaze, only fatigue and trust. "Everything will be fine, baby. Ivan whispered, washing the dirt off Tenny's muzzle. An hour later, the wolf was clean. His fur, though wet, smelled of forest and earth. Ivan brought a large towel and began to wipe Shadow, each of his gestures full of care, as if he were healing invisible wounds. Then he went into the hut and took out a piece of raw meat left over from yesterday's dinner. Placing the meat on a wooden box, he sat down opposite it and waited. Shadow smelled the meat. With difficulty, staggering, he got up on his paws and slowly approached the meat. His movements were uncertain, but hunger forced him to move. He began to eat, slowly but greedily. Ivan smiled, his eyes glistening with tears. "That's right, boy. Live," he said quietly. Shadow, without taking his eyes off the man, finished the meat and lay down, breathing more evenly. Ivan took out his old cell phone and dialed the number of the Forest Harbor Reserve. "I found a wolf cub. He's barely alive. Come quickly, he needs help," he said, his voice firm but full of emotion. 3 hours later, a jeep pulled up to the hut. A young ranger named Alexei got out of the car, looked at the wolf, and nodded to Ivan. "Did you call?" he asked. "Yes, he was stuck in the swamp. I pulled him out with a boat," Ivan replied. Alexei approached Tenny, checked his breathing, wounds and reactions. "You did the impossible. Another couple of hours and he would have been gone," he said, looking respectfully at the old man. Together they carried the wolf into a light metal cage and loaded it into the jeep. Tenny did not resist, only turned his head and looked at Ivan. His eyes sparkled as if to say, "Thank you." Ivan approached the cage, reached through the bars, and stroked Shadow on the head. "Goodbye, little one. I did what I could. Now it's your turn to live," he said. Alexei closed the door, checked the lock, and signaled to the driver. The jeep drove off, disappearing into the gathering twilight. Ivan stood in the middle of the yard, looking at the red sky where the sunset was fading. For the first time in many years of loneliness, he felt warmth in his chest, as if his soul had come to life. The wolf was taken to the Lesnaya Gava Nature Reserve, where he was placed in a semi-wild enclosure. Veterinarians determined that Tenny was about 2 years old, and that his exhaustion was caused by malnutrition and stress. After a month, he grew stronger. His coat shone, and his eyes were filled with life again. At the reserve, he was named Iskra for that first hopeful glance he gave Ivan. Since then, Ivan no longer felt lonely. A quiet howl remained in his heart forever, echoing from his memories. And somewhere in the forests of the Misty Hills, the wind whispered of the miracle that had brought together a man and a wild beast. Thank you for reading this story. If you liked it, please support us by liking it and subscribing to our channel.